Well, hello, and welcome to another webinar presented by Vertical Aviation International, VAI. My name is Chuck Street. I'm the U.S. Western Region representative for VAI. It is my pleasure to be the host of today's webinar. Today, we're going to spotlight a harrowing rescue accomplished by a very talented U.S. Coast Guard crew utilizing a twin-engine MH-65 Echo Dolphin helicopter with close coordination between multiple first responder agencies. The rescue took place in late March of this year, 2025. Now, this is a very captivating story, and I think you're going to find that the case too as you view this. And by the way, during the last segment of our presentation, you as a viewer will have an opportunity to ask questions or to make comments. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see the Q&A button. Just click on that button and type in your question or comment. We'll get to as many questions and comments as time permits. Now, let me set up the scene here. Two hikers were stranded on a rugged Northern California cliff which overlooked the Pacific Ocean. One of the hikers was stranded below the trail, but uninjured. The other climber had slipped about 100 feet down from the trail and was barely holding on with his hiking poles to the rock face, which was very unstable. The rocky face could have collapsed at any moment. 80 feet below, ocean waves crashed into the rocky shoreline. The hiker's physical strength was beginning to fade. He had numerous lacerations and cuts and had dislocated his shoulder. The clock was ticking. Local authorities called for the assistance of the United States Coast Guard. Now, let me introduce our special guest. Joining us today are Coast Guard pilot Lieutenant Mitchell Dow and Coast Guard rescue swimmer AST-2 Phil Morey, who were both involved in this harrowing rescue. So thank you both for joining us and being a part of this VAI webinar.
Thanks for having us, Chuck. Pleasure.
Well, you and your crew and the helicopter are based at the U.S. Coast Guard station at Humboldt Bay, which is situated in Northern California. What's the distance between your base and the rocky face where the hikers were stranded?
There's about, I think it's 48 to 50 miles, about a 23 to 24 minute transit via helicopter.
Okay. And so once a call comes in for service in a situation like this, how long does it take to get airborne?
We try to be airborne in 30 minutes. Cases like this are a little bit more unique, and if we think we need to slow it down just because it was kind of a in between agency assist as well as what our normal maritime distress cases are. However, when I met up with Phil right outside of our command center, we knew this one was a little bit quicker based on the initial information we had of him kind of clinging onto the cliff. So turned to Phil. He got a little bit more information from the command center, and I went to the rest of my crew. We have a flight mechanic and another co-pilot, Ethan Schlepp and Angela Ortiz, and had them go start the helicopter up. Because like I said, it gets us, if we're quick, we can get airborne. We get the helicopter started about 10 to 15 minutes, and by quicker cases, we get airborne about 20 to 25 minutes. And I think on this one, we got airborne about 23 to 24 minutes.
Okay, because the situation was urgent. So there's 4 crew members on board the aircraft.
Correct. Yep. We have 2 pilots up front in our typical configuration just to be able to fly all weather. And then our flight mechanic who works on the helicopter as well as runs the hoist. And then Phil here is our rescue swimmer who trusts me to put him in the right spot to jump out and go to the rescues.
Yeah.
Okay. So Lieutenant Dow, do you mind if I call you Mitch?
Yep, Mitch is fine.
Okay. So you have a pretty interesting background. You're a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis. In fact, several members of your extended family have also served in the Navy. As a naval aviator, you flew in many locales around the globe. Talk about that a little bit. I think you were in Afghanistan, right?
I was actually just logistics support for the Persian Gulf. We flew up into Iraq and a little bit of around kind of Iran and down to the UAE and everything. We flew the MH-60 Sierra. I grew up like you said as a Navy family. My dad, my uncle, and my grandfather all flew. Started with my grandfather back World War II timeframe, flying giant seaplanes and Connies, Constellations. And then both my uncle and my dad were aviators in the P-3 Orion sub hunting kind of throughout the Cold War. And I just grew up around it, loved the idea of flying helicopters or jets in the Navy, and really had no other choice in my mind of what I was going to do, of flying something for the Navy.
So, so you were in the Navy for what, 10 years, 9 years?
It was 10 years. Yep, did three different I guess assignments there. Did the Navy kind of does a sea tour, shore tour, sea tour thing. So I did HSC 26, which that was my 2 deployments out to the Persian Gulf with four MH-60s based out of the International Airport. Like I said, we just did combat logistics for the entire Persian Gulf, whatever came up with personnel delivery, mail delivery, equipment, people, you name it. We did it. And then I was lucky enough to do an instructor tour with HSC2 at the FRS, where all the fresh nuggets out of flight school came and learned how to fly the 60 Sierra for a year. And then I did my disassociated tour as kind of in the as ship's company for a little bit before I made the decision to try to come to the Coast Guard.
So that's a good question. What made you decide to lateral over to the Coast Guard?
When I was in the at the FRS as instructor, we were trying to revamp a lot of our SAR standardization, and I reached out to the Coast Guard quite a bit, and it was kind of funny and surprising that as the Navy we were trying to reinvent stuff, the Coast Guard had been doing it for quite a long time, and working with some of the people out of Elizabeth City both as a standardization instructor at the FRS and concentrating a lot into the search and rescue and the shipboard stuff. Really got to interact with them, kind of got a little bit of information. They collect or they get about 25 to 25% of their pilots from other services through the direct commission aviator program. So I pursued that, and it was a long year, 2 years of doing that, getting a lot of no's, getting a lot of Navy's going to hold on to me, waivers with the Coast Guard because they didn't want you going over 10 years and everything, but finally made the jump because of the mission they do, flying a lot. And I couldn't be happier. I'd still go Navy to Coast Guard if I had to do it all over again, but the life in the Coast Guard has been really good.
Great. So Phil Morey, you serve as a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. Let's briefly talk about your background. So I mean, obviously you love to swim. I think I heard that you were like a competitive swimmer most of your young life. Let's talk about your background there.
Yeah, I'm born and raised North Carolina. I'd say most swimmers we grow up in getting into athletics early, and I've been swimming my whole life competitively, and I went to college at UNCW, Wilmington, North Carolina, and through there I kind of gravitated towards ocean rescue. It was like a summer job I could hold, and it's an elite group of rescuers there, and got me kind of into the EMT field with that, and then it just seemed like a natural progression. One of my close friends joined the Coast Guard, and I got to go and see what being a rescue swimmer was about before getting in, and that led me right to it. It's pretty simple as that. And I was always into rescuing people, and I did love the water, and it just seemed like rescue swimming was kind of the tip of the iceberg there. It was the cream of the crop. And in 2020 I joined, and rescue swimmer school with the Coast Guard is a high fail out rate. It was kind of a stressful year and a half there for training. But I made it through on my first try. And then, so I got here to Humboldt in 2022, and this is my first operational unit. And it's been a wild 3 years here operating as a swimmer. I've had a lot of good cases here. And so the dream is very much alive.
You spend a lot of time suspended on the long line, which extends from the host. I think most people would be terrified to do this. What's it like for you?
Yeah. I've never been in a helicopter until I first got here. And my first flight was with you. I think it was.
Yeah,
it was
10 to 12 foot surf.
10 to 12 foot surf. So Wednesdays we have big training days, right? And I'll just kind of talk about my first time in a helicopter. And I guess you're just overwhelmed at first. So first time in a helicopter, we flew, I don't know, 2 miles off the air station here and into 10 to 12 foot surf. And it's like right when I got here, I'm jumping into big waves and training and saving people. But yeah, what's it like being on the hoist? It's overwhelming at first being in there and seeing that this is the job, but we train every week, almost every day. And so you just get dosed with it over time, and it really does become second nature, and you just gain a lot of trust in your crew and your equipment, which just kind of settles the nerves, because it is exciting. It'll never not be, but you do get used to it over time.
I don't know, to me, for what you're doing, you talked about 12-foot surf and swells. It sounds like you got to be a superhuman, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, in great physical condition. How do you
yeah,
stay
yeah.
in such great shape?
So, like I said, getting through swimmer school, it's a high fail out rate. And I mean, 80% of it is you're in the pool and you've got, grown men basically attacking you in the pool, trying to drown you. And you're doing all sorts of water confidence drills, underwater drills. Um, so, they call it water confidence for a reason. You go through that 6 months training of basically drown proofing yourself. So when a big wave comes, you're just prepared. You can hold your breath for a long time. You can push past a lot of discomfort, and then on top of that, our swimmer shop here, Tuesdays and Thursdays are swim days, right? So we go to the pool, but we also get to go to the ocean and train. So it's a big push here to really train in the water, and not just, the pool is excellent, but there's nothing like getting in the water regularly, facing big waves, whether it's even just surfing or swimming through it, and just getting dosed with all of that to be comfortable, to say the least.
So can I ask you your age?
Yeah, I'm 29. I guess, yeah, I started operating at 25. So I would
So
say prime time,
that's what I asked that question because it sounds like this is a young person's gig.
Yeah, yeah. It's tough to make it 20 doing it. A lot of people do get worn out, but I would say most people give a solid probably 13 to 15 years of operating as a swimmer before they're kind of doing their twilight tour and instructing or doing stuff in the classroom, away from big waves.
Okay, well, thank you for what you do. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the helicopter. It's an Airbus MH-65 Echo Dolphin. So Mitch, what are its capabilities? And then it also has some limitations too.
Absolutely. It's the smallest. It's our smallest helicopter. We kind of call it the SR, the short range recovery helicopter. It's designed to go. The original package when we got it back in the 80s was designed to go 90 miles offshore, get two people and come back. Especially places like Humboldt, we push it. Just last year, I went just under 100 miles offshore to get a guy off of a sailboat. Another with the helicopter itself, it's in the two or three that I actually four now that I've flown in my life. It's the best IFR in the clouds helicopter I think you can kind of come across. It has a really, really good autopilot, really good radar. We've just upgraded. You mentioned I was that 65 Echo. The Echo upgrade was all glass cockpit with an improved radar. So from the search standpoint of getting out in the clouds, especially here in Humboldt, our airport, I don't know if we discussed this earlier, but the Humboldt airport itself was an old Navy research airport designed to figure out stuff like the ILS, instrument landing systems. There's a bunch of old research and photos of how they used to burn giant walls of fire to burn the fog off to see if that would work. They canceled it due to passenger comfort of an airliner landing between walls of fire. So with that, the 65 is absolutely really capable of getting us through the clouds and back in. Some of its, I guess, downsides are a little bit of lack of power and its ability to hold a full fuel tank. So we normally, our standard SAR fuel load is about 200 pounds of fuel, about 20 minutes less than what we can actually take if we were just going out and doing a trainer with only either single pilot or with three people on board. Fills an extra 20 minutes of gas when we bring him.
Yep.
So, but in a hover, we have to manage a lot of our power required versus power available quite a bit. We can take off at just under 9,500 pounds, but we can't hover legally per our manuals until we're about 9,200 pounds. So again, about a 25 to 30-minute fuel burn. And even then, with some of the lighter winds or some of the weird swirly winds we get around here along the coastline, sometimes we can't even hover until our magic number is right around 8,800, 8,900 pounds. So about, again, 40 minutes of flying when the helicopter really starts to shine power wise. Up until that point is very power limited.
Okay, so it's really about managing power.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And then I hear that the area, Humboldt area, they're famous for their fog, for the fog.
Yep. Yeah, and today we woke up to our airport, I think was 100.5, and that's actually pretty good. That means we can shoot our ILS. We have a specific copter ILS in Humboldt that gets us down to 100.25. And there's a lot of brave souls here that fly in Humboldt that we have the old breath of the copter ILS where you see the lights at 100 feet, but you really don't see enough to hover until maybe 17 to 25 feet sometimes.
Oh yeah.
So it's I think forgot which one of that is. I think PJ, if you have the fuel video, I think at about 104, it shows what it's like to come in on our ILS at night. I think that one I shot when we came in at 100 and just I think it was somewhere between a quarter and a half for that. But for people watching, kind of shows like I said, right about a minute. There it is. If you maybe go forward, there's it's starting to show up. That's pretty much our breakout right there. And as we come in.
Wow. All right, so let's get back to the mission. How long was the flight between your Coast Guard station in Humboldt and the scene of the stranded hikers?
Right around 25 minutes.
Okay, so that's a ground speed of what? Probably what, 150 miles an hour?
Yeah, 150 miles an hour. We typically cruise. We kind of pull a max range power. We call about 80% of our torque, and that gets us going right around 130, 135 knots, depending upon what equipment. If we have the night sun or some, if we forget to pull our gear up. But yeah, right around probably 155, 160 miles an hour, just beyond that. Just if we get a good our typical northwest tailwind, which we did not have that day. We actually had very little winds that day.
Okay. Okay, so you arrive at the scene of the hikers that were stranded on the rock face. How difficult was it to visually locate the hikers from the air?
It was actually it wasn't bad. Luckily, one, we train a lot too, so our eyes are pretty good at finding both people in the water and over land. But I actually think Phil saw some jet skis first. We knew there were some jet skis in a boat in the water, and a lot of time when I'm getting on scene, the flight mech and the rescue swimmer, they're pretty much just eyes out looking the whole time. In our flight computer trying to figure out fuel, bingo, weather, everything else. And then once I think Phil called it out, said, hey, there's some jet skis. And at that point, they were pointing towards the actual rock face. And Phil, Phil and I hate to laugh at it, but every time we see that video, we think how, for lack of a better term, ridiculous it was to see just a guy suspended 60, 80 feet above pretty big boulders. And he gave he let go of his poles just for a second and just gave a quick little wave and then gripped back onto his poles. And yeah, we see the video right now and I was not expecting it to be that bad. We get a lot of hikers along the Lost Coast that kind of slide down and they're normally at least on a little ledge. Mm-hmm. The initial shock of seeing him gripping like that, I think everyone kind of had a couple seconds to realize, oh, this is real and we need to get moving.
Yeah, there's a lot of we just get a lot of calls where it does sound extreme and you get there and it's the telephone game and it's a whole different story when you get on scene. But this one was one of those crazy ones where no, it's like he's on a cliff 100 feet up and fell, and it's just wild to see that.
So what was the pitch of the cliff? I think, was it 70 degrees? I mean, that's almost straight up and down, right?
Yeah, I think it was there were sections that were definitely straight up and down. It's always hard. It's funny you asked that because it's actually sometimes hard to tell. That one was definitely steep, but something that you tend to forget too is the cliff's obviously 3D, and something that we, as not only are we handling how steep it is and him holding on, but they're very almost like mini mounds and crevasses on the cliff. So when we put Phil in, he actually couldn't see the guy right away. There was a good 6-foot wall where we thought was a good insertion point that was safe away from, and we can kind of talk about it later, but we have certain techniques that we do. That way the survivor doesn't jump at our swimmer. So we insert him either in an L or J shape to where he can work his way along the cliff, start talking to the guy. But I'll let Phil kind of expand upon that, but he couldn't even see the survivor at first.
Yeah. We picked an insertion point, right? And I was going down and it was a good spot. It's right where we briefed to put me. Yeah. And, so the survivor was on my left-hand side. And so as soon as I got a grip onto the cliff, right, I point the helicopter into the cliff so that they can move into it, so they can give me kind of positive tension so I can actually have weight on my feet against the cliff. And then it's basically just a pointing game to the left. But yeah, I know the survivor was to my left, but I looked to my left and he was completely hidden. If it's hard to see in the video, but yeah, he is basically to the left of a big it's a ridge, I guess. And so as I'm working left, I'm like, man, I still don't see this guy. I still don't see this guy. Yeah, I guess you can see in this video here.
Because even in the video, you can see, I mean, it doesn't look like much, but
yeah, that's a solid like 5 to 8 foot ridge that he's on both sides of him. So he's kind of like, he's in a little crevice there. But yeah, as soon as I got to that ridge line, I popped over and sure enough, there he was, kind of like wide eyed, you know, pupils dilated.
I would say, what was his demeanor? I would assume he was pretty exhausted. He's probably in shock because he had a dislocated shoulder and other lacerations. Right. So did he talk to you? Did he seem panicky? I mean,
yeah, he was pretty calm. He, you know, I was just like, don't move. You know, I don't want him to move. You know, I don't know. The tendency might be that somebody would want to grab onto you, but, you know, one of my rescue equipment, it's just it's a quick strap, right? So it's basically a strap I put around his back under his arms. And so as soon as I got over the ridge, I was like, just don't move, stay there. I'm like, don't move, stay gripped. And, you know, he just looked at me and was nodding his head yes. And he was pretty calm, which is always good. And yeah, just it was one of those things where I was just super grateful that the helicopter was very stable. It was like, it was almost flawless. And, you know, my goal is when I get to the victim, I don't want to move a lot. I want to be right there on him. And there's a lot of times where, you know, you get bumped up 5 feet, maybe moved forward or left a couple feet, but this one we were rock steady. And yeah, the guy was very calm. I give him kudos for that. He remained calm, and he was just relieved when I got the strap around him when we started going up. It like huge weight off his shoulders. He was definitely spooked. But
yeah. Well, let's back up for a second. So you arrive on the scene, you make an assessment of, and then you come up with a plan. And I think that in this situation, you had too much fuel on board. So Mitch, talk about that process. You're assessing the situation, and then
it sounds weird because when you train up and coming pilots, we train them to land really well. We train them in the mountains. We train them how to take on big surf and everything. I think some of the hardest things that we try to train them to is just basic. It's not basic, but it's fuel management, and especially in an underpowered helicopter, because you don't want to get rid of the fuel too early. And you also don't want to sit there and, I mean, for us to burn down the fuel we needed to hoist based on the power calculations, we've had to fly for 30 to 35 minutes. So it's a tough decision to make, because we know we can't get the fuel back. 2, we're trying not to just dump too much fuel into, I don't know, in the ocean. It's a decision that's not made lightly. It's a decision we train to a lot. But for more of the specifics, I knew that as I was doing that, I'm making kind of fuel calculations the whole time. I knew I had 2 guys I needed to pick up. So that's on average about 175 to 180 pounds. So quick public math and everything, just under 400 pounds. I think I decided to suggest about 350 pounds, because that would have put me at what I like for my helicopter to be at a good state. At right around 8,850 to 8,900 pounds is kind of our good state. That video showing right now is our closest fuel source that we could get fuel from Cal Fire. So I have to take that into accountability. I also need to take into account the weather that we're encompassing. We kind of punched through, as you saw in that initial video, a little bit of a thinner, it was thick over where we launched out of, but then luckily it wasn't too bad over the site. But we knew we had a forecast, I think, between 100 and 200 foot ceilings back home that we were going to be coming back to. So I needed fuel for the actual approach, because it's very common. I think my last 6 SAR cases, 5 of them have come back to under 200 foot ceilings. So all that's kind of going in my head, and we made the decision to still try to get back home in case we need to get him to a hospital. But also we had Shelter Cove Airport right here, which I think some of the videos were showing. There's kind of my basic calculation that I do of, in my head, our computer can kind of show us the mileage back and forth between Shelter Cove and the rescue site. Again, I think it was about like 4 or 5 miles. And then I think this video eventually gets into kind of my very rudimentary kind of fuel calculations, more in an Excel spreadsheet, but still 50-mile transit back home. So as I do that, this kind of shows that I start with my total fuel, my fuel on takeoff, how much in route fuel I need to go there and back, minus that route fuel. I decided to jettison 350 to get myself down to weight, as well as get myself back home. And as you kind of work through that whole thing, we also have to try to land with 200 pounds of reserve fuel. We're allowed to go under that, but it's got to be a good risk decision. And then it gives me about 225 pounds left to do the rescue. And based on the quick burn, we burn about 700 pounds per hour hovering. So again, this is done with Excel, so it's a little bit more accurate. But in my mind, I was right at what we call kind of for bingo to be able to go back home. So we made the decision about halfway through the first hoist to commit ourselves to Shelter Cove, where we knew we wouldn't be getting fuel for about 4 or 5 hours.
Okay. Now, so you didn't have time to burn the fuel by flying.
Nope.
You have a method to be able to just jettison the fuel, right? And
Correct. Yep. So luckily, as we do the calculation in the computer, know how much, we do a quick brief, and then we just flick a couple switches. We have a left and a right jettison, and they got rid of I think, like I said, we burned about 300, went offshore a little bit and dumped jettisoned, because it was planned. It wasn't an emergency. So jettisoned about 350 pounds of fuel, about, like I said, 175 out at each side, left and right. We have a procedure through it. We work through it. We make sure we know a safe place to land if it doesn't secure. But no, my co-pilot Angela, she did a good job kind of handling that, helping me with that and backing me up with the calculations. And she was flying. I was flying as she was handling the switches. And then Ethan, my flight mech. Side note, it was actually his first live hoist. Normally you get over water behind a boat, but his first live hoist was a 180-foot cliff case. So, or at least a hoist. And then, we jettisoned the fuel and then went to work with putting fill down and figuring out the rotor wash and the power and everything from there.
So when you jettison the fuel, you say it pretty much evaporates before hitting the ocean, right?
We try to climb up as high as we can. So we climbed up a little bit higher. Typically right between, I think, if I remember correctly, 4,000 and 6,000 feet. It does atomize as it comes out. Unfortunately, with the Coast Guard, sometimes with the weather and everything, I don't think we could quite get that up that high, but we did climb up. We also don't want to go too far away, because there's also that thing that with the Coast Guard and rescuing someone, you want to continue to give them hope, whether they're gripping to the side of a cliff or whatever. So we want to make sure we didn't just climb 6,000 feet. I don't even think we had the ceiling to do it. I think we had a little bit of a ceiling here and there. So I think we ended up going maybe up to a couple thousand feet, just real quick, just in the fuel and come back. Like I said, I mean, we were off scene, back on scene in probably less than 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So you can jettison that much fuel in 3 minutes.
Yeah, it goes by pretty quick. It might have been closer to 5. I can't remember, but it goes out pretty quick. And then we just kind of get set up from there. And then a big thing with us having kind of the gravity, it's more of like a gravity kind of jettison, that we do a couple maneuvers of the helicopter to make sure the fuel kind of continues out of the jettison valve before we come into a hover, just so we don't continue to sprinkle fuel. I think there's still normally some fuel in the air, just naturally with it kind of sticking around coming off the helicopter, but most of the fuel was still offshore and mixing in with the ocean if it did make it to the surface.
Okay, so you show up on the scene, the stranded climber sees you, and then you depart the area. Is somebody telling him that you're going to be right back?
Yeah, we were in radio contact with, I think it was Shelter Cove volunteer fire and rescue, and those guys are unbelievable. I mean, full volunteer force, jet skis, boat, fire trucks, and they are, from that kind of video PJ was showing earlier, very remote airport. Like I said, about a 3-hour drive from our base just to get to Shelter Cove through a windy road. So they're kind of out on their own, and they do quite a lot of rescues on their own. They were the original ones, I think, to ask for the helicopter assist. And they had 2 jet ski swimmers, I think, that they threw out into the surf. Those guys made it through, I don't know, Volkswagen-sized boulders.
Yeah.
And worked their way through it wasn't that big that day, but still, anything over 3 or 4 feet that they were handling gets pretty dangerous as they're getting inshore. And they had radios, and they were able to yell to the guy to kind of say, hey, helicopter's assessing it. They're figuring something out real quick. They'll be right back. So we were in constant communications with them, which is very awesome in this area of how much we train and the amount of cases we do. The swimmers do a lot of training with our local agencies, and that's just really huge and when these cases do happen, to make sure that those communication flow happens and we're prepared, and we don't really hiccup in that moment when someone's life is on the line.
Okay. Well, in case you just joined us, we're talking with Lieutenant Mitch Dow and Phil Morey, who's a rescue swimmer. Both of them are with the U.S. Coast Guard. And what we're talking about is a very harrowing rescue that happened in Northern California along the coast with two hikers that were stranded on the side of almost a sheer cliff. And it's anyway, it's just interesting how all this progresses. So you've jettisoned the fuel, you come back. Now you can't hover, I would assume you can't hover too close to the stranded climber because the rotor wash may push him off of his precarious perch, right? So you have to decide how high you're going to be. And then that brings up the question of your hoist. How long is that cable?
So 245 feet is what we can hoist to. And then we get an indication, we call it the barber pole for the last little bit of the cable itself. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we got volume too, or if it's going to mess it up, but the very first thing that we do, we get in the hover, make sure our power is good. And then I joke is I'm just the bus driver. And then I kind of set it over to Phil. I asked him if he can see the cliff. He's either up along in the door ready to go, or he's looking out his window. And I let him kind of run with it. And I'll let him kind of speak to how that initial briefing kind of goes.
Yeah. I guess after Mitch does all the power checks and stuff and we pull into that hover, I'm basically pointing out the insertion point. It's a group decision, but I'm kind of like the final say of like, yeah, I want to go there. So, right. So you see me going down here, I pick the spot and then I basically go to the door. I'll stay on comms and I'll just guide. I'll just say like, we'll say easy left, easy forward, easy back, wherever I need the helicopter to go. And kind of just inch towards where I think I am directly over the spot we briefed. And at that point, I'm going down and then we're guiding the rest of the rescue from there. But it really is like minor movements at the helicopter directed by hand signals from me at the bottom.
And we talk about a lot of the hazards. Our biggest hazard that based on what the guy looked like when we first got on scene, we were really worried about a rotor wash. It's a lot. It's a tough decision because there's never a right answer. Of the higher up we go, the less rotor wash, but the less visibility, the more cable, the more swing. But if we go too low, we put too much rotor wash on them. And unfortunately with these cliffs, the reason why he fell down is they were very loose. So even if we avoid a rotor wash, something that Phil said that we were just kicking down pebble after rock after pebble on top of them, just because even though we were about 100, I think we had about 120 feet of cable out from the rat out and a bar out comparison. But we were still, Phil said he was getting kicked with pebbles the entire time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, and again, like we discussed, that we kind of want more wind, right? If we have like a 15 knot headwind, not only is it going to increase power, but it's going to push that, rotor wash behind the helicopter. So in the no wind days, it's unavoidable. You're going to get blown around and get some debris. But luckily, like if you see that cliff there, it's no big rocks fell. It was all like, I would say like, pebble size gravel and sand, but not ideal, but unavoidable.
So Mitch, you as the pilot, can you see Phil at the end of the line? Can you see the person who was stranded on the cliff? So, or are you just relying on hand signals, which what you call them, your mechanic, your flight mechanic is on board, is relaying, a little to the right, a little to the left. How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the initial setup. I can see the survivor, and then I pretty much kind of lose visual contact with that survivor in the insertion point, and I'm just picking out a tree branch and a rock. And Ethan, my flight mech, and Phil initially is kind of saying, yeah, a little more right, a little more right. All right, that's good. And then he disconnects, and that's the last time. Phil, it's pretty normal for good cases for the flight mech. I normally see them pound the fists real quick, saying, hey, good luck. And that's the last time we'll see Phil for about 10 minutes. And I don't see him the rest of the rescue. We don't do a door off. we don't open our doors, and I don't have like a bubble window to be able to see the whole time. I am just solely trusting Ethan and Phil's hand signals to put the helicopter in the right safe spot the entire time. I'm clearing some points of it, but Ethan's clearing my entire tail, the rotor disc as best he can. I can kind of pick up a little bit of the rotor disc, and in some of that video, you'll hear a lot of that interaction between Ethan and me as he's just calling me in the direction he wants me to go. My co-pilot's watching my torque and my altitude, and I'm kind of trying to get little glances in. But if I go too inside for too long, I'm going to lose what I'm rifle sighting on to make sure that I don't drift Phil, because every little bit of movement that the helicopter does, Phil feels it 10 times more. So if I go up even a foot, he's gonna then the flight mech's got to react to that. He's not going to pay the cable out as fast or up. Phil's going to try to be walking against it, and it just becomes this huge, I don't know, multiplication of forces that it can get pretty dangerous pretty quick on the cliff rescue. That's why we kind of consider an extremely high risk mission anytime we're putting Phil down on the cliff.
Right.
So Phil, you're wearing a special harness which attaches to the hoist cable.
Correct.
What's it like stepping out of the cockpit? What's it like stepping out the door? I guess you're just more concerned about reaching the stranded hiker, or what? I mean, what's going through your mind?
So, you know, what's funny is I almost think the flight to SAR cases it's worse almost. Because I don't know, you're just spinning up stories in your head before you get there. And I don't know, when you get on scene, you know, you really do just start, all right, we got to plan it out. And so like just going through the steps of like getting a plan together, and it is stuff we train all the time. So like by the time I'm going out the door, I'm just like, I already have choreographed in my head what this is going to look like exactly. And I'm just trying to focus on that, you know, because you know, you can't help but look down, you're 160 feet up, but you really do. You just have to trust your equipment, and you just trust your pilots, trust your flight mechs. Because I almost think the flight mech has a hard job out of all of us, because he really is the middleman of like interpreting my signs, you know, catching you know, whatever the pilots are doing, whether they're drifting forward or not. You know, they're seeing the whole thing, bird's eye view. And but yeah, stepping out of the helicopter, by that point, like I said, I'm kind of in game mode. You know, I just put the shades down, and it's one step at a time from there, baby steps.
Okay, so the one who was really in a precarious position, he had a dislocated shoulder, and you indicated earlier that you put like some type of strap around his torso, so that must have been kind of painful for him. And
yeah, and that's something that you know, I'm talking to him when I'm down there, and you know, it's like visibly dislocated, and you know, I'm trying to you do your best to tell the you know, talk to the victim and like explain what's happening. On a cliff, you have less time, because you don't want to give a whole biography on what's going on. You really just want to get the strap on them, because the worst thing that can happen is they lose their footing and they start sliding, and then it's like a physical grip situation where then I don't have a strap. I just have to use my hands and bear hug them, which is worse. So yeah, I basically routed that strap, and I said, as you know, as precise as I could, I'm like, it's going under your arms. I'm going to need you to just hold your arms down by your side as tight as you can. And he just gave me a head nod and was like, I can do it. And, you know, part of the job too, you know, as soon as you feel, you know, the helicopter starting to pull you up, I'm basically trying to wrap my legs around him and pin his arms to his sides, because, you know, if you put your arms straight up, you're not going to fall out, but you're more likely to fall out. So it's really a big deal to keep those arms pinned down to your side. So yeah, I wrapped him on that good arm, and then I just kind of let him use his injured arm to do as much work as he could with his comfort level. And yeah, that's kind of how that went.
okay, so you bring the two of you up.
Right.
Does he stay in? Do you both stay on the helicopter, or do you take him over to some spot, land, let him get out to get me?
Right. Yeah,
then you go back and get the other hiker who was, you know, he wasn't really injured, but he was in a tough spot. So
right.
Yeah, he was able to, I think, navigate himself to a little bit better spot. That was a little bit, we did not tell him to. They were asking if we wanted to move. I was like, no, I can get him where he is. And I think the Shelter Cove Fire and Rescue were able to kind of guide him to a little bit safer spot for him. And we kind of had all those contingencies in place. We planned on getting them both at the same time, but on the pickup with Phil and the guy, we have 100% torque available, and I was pulling 95 to 97%. So I just made the call that the second guy was perfectly safe. He was in a better spot. He wasn't going to fall anytime soon, and it made more sense with, we knew kind of as the first guy's injuries, the first hikers, but we decided to make the decision to get him to the EMS, and that would just, again, give us an extra 2 to 3% power that we wouldn't have had otherwise, and we burn out a little bit more fuel. And it sounds so insignificant, especially for any pilots out there that probably fly. I mean, coming from the 60, I wouldn't even be having this discussion. I would have been hoisting 25 people, no problem, and power would have never been an issue. That would actually, probably room would have been an issue at that point. Same thing. I know some of my friends that fly some of the Hueys, as well as the like A stars and everything. They don't really worry as much about power. It's more of a room thing. But for us, it's just any extra percent of torque matters, and that was what kind of went into that decision to deliver him back to EMS, both his state as well as our power situation.
Right.
So, was the second extraction easier or harder?
Yeah, easier.
It was way easier. He was sitting. He was on more of a trail.
Yeah, it wasn't nearly as steep. I mean, it was just a normal. I mean, it had maybe, I don't know, 10 degrees of slope, so nothing significant. And he was just sitting there and probably spooked. That also is probably why he didn't want to go down to the beach. But
yeah, the trail that he took was a deer trail, so it was only about 3 inches to 6 inches wide,
maybe a foot.
And there was, we decided to hold him there too, just because where he was, he still had a pretty good area. If he had to continue down towards the beach, there's another area where one quick slip and he's going off an 80-foot cliff. So we kind of were like, okay, it's safer for us to hoist him from this position for than him to continue. So, but yeah, that was the basic decision, to kind of split him up. And a lot of this stuff happens in the brief. We had all those contingencies in place. Even if Phil had to short haul him with a physical grip, or if the guy was in pain during that whole setup there. That video for the cliff footage is very long, because we're just talking through all that stuff. We're talking about if we run out of cable, we're talking about rotor clearances, we're talking about the rotor wash, we're talking about Phil's contingencies of a physical grip, of a relocation, of if the guy's hurting and we want to just take them 30 feet down instead of 180 feet up.
Right.
All those different contingencies are briefed in that first 3 to 4 minutes before we put Phil out the door.
But you mentioned having only 15 minutes of fuel left after you were extracting the second climber.
Yep.
I mean, I would think that my anxiety level would be climbing in that situation.
It gets up there. I kind of hate to say that we're used to not having fuel, but it happens a lot. There's like I said, there's a lot of training that goes into it. There's a lot of restless nights trying to make sure that we know how to do fuel calculations quick, and we trust our flight computers. We had Shelter Cove there the whole time. It was clear, no weather. We just had no maintenance, no fuel. The only thing we had was a local brewery for dinner, which actually turned out to be kind of fun. It's kind of a little victory kind of dinner.
It's a good ending.
But we had enough fuel to possibly get back to that outlying field of Fortuna, where Cal Fire is located with the fuel truck. However, we didn't know what the weather was. That whole area of the Lost Coast has a completely different climate than even 10 to 20 miles to the north. You go around Cape Mendocino there, and depending on what the winds are doing and what the fronts are doing, you can go from clear to 50-foot fog and no problem. And we don't have very many weather sources. We didn't have too good at internet, and we're relying on our operational specialists to kind of interpolate some weather for us. And we just thought as a crew, it was just the best call to just land at a safe airport, shut down. And like I said, the heroes of Cal Fire, they drove, I think it was 4.5 hours round trip to deliver us fuel, which we have that ongoing relationship with them. They use some of our fuel caches. We use some of their fuel trucks in these very unique kind of situations and cases where we're saving a life. So it's again, I can't expand enough of the relationships we have with all our local police, fire departments, Cal Fire, state agencies, Shasta Fire, the Shelter Cove Fire guys. I mean, all those guys have had at least 8 to 10 cases where they've come through for us for different resources and fuel and personnel.
I have just a couple of more questions for you guys. What would you want hikers and the public to know before venturing into remote terrain like the Lost Coast?
I mean, we don't want them to not do it. Just be prepared. Have the biggest thing those guys had is I think they were just doing a day hike, but they had, I don't know if it was a Garmin InReach or what. They had some kind of remote satellite texting capability to let them know because there's no cell phone signal. But be prepared for that. I mean, most of us, even when we travel around here, we all have some kind of remote communication device when we're hiking, even driving on our highways that get closed down from earthquakes or landslides or anything. Like a lot of us kind of carry all that. So just be prepared. Like, don't not do it. Just make sure you do the research, be prepared, know that it is the weather and the terrain out here is way harder and way worse than what it looks like on all the Instagram posts and everything. And also carry simple stuff like keeping your cell phone charged, having a reflective mirror. We can see that stuff from so far away that people kind of forget about just the simpler stuff. They want to have all the latest and greatest gear and technology, but talking to experienced guides and everything can kind of help you with that. Of, like I said, anything that there's so many cases at night where we just say, hey, is your cell phone working? Yep. And they shine their cell phone at us and we can see them from 20 miles away on our night vision goggles. And then I'll let Phil speak more from the actual rescue standpoint.
Yeah. I was just going to say, yeah, the PLBs, personal locator beacons, right? A lot of, just to, continue on with that point, a lot of dead zones out here, a lot of places your phone won't work. So having a EPIRB or something that will, communicate with satellite that you need help. And then, I don't know. The Lost Coast is kind of interesting because from what I understand, a lot of the trail will just be closed off depending on the tides. So it's just a good idea to know the ocean, like no ocean knowledge. Because most of that trail, you're just right on the Pacific, right on the coastline. So just being comfortable in the water when you're going on the Lost Coast Trail could save your life.
Okay. So final question for each of you personally. What does it mean to do this kind of work for you? And specifically, what does it mean to each of you to have been a part of this successful mission? And we'll start with you first, Mitch.
I mean, we're always part of like a bigger picture. I think Phil and I feel lucky to just kind of put out the Coast Guard mission and I mean, we're always hurting for recruiting. We always want the best swimmers and the best pilots out there. And this stuff is happening every day in the Coast Guard. I think it gets highlighted just because as part of my other hobby, I do a lot of the photos. I mean, we have all the photos around here. I've tried to like show what the Coast Guard does. I try to carry a camera with me every training flight or mission I go on and safely kind of capture what's going on. But I mean, between all up and down the West Coast, between San Diego, Magoo, here, Astoria, North Bend, Port Angeles, I don't think I'm missing anybody, but we're constantly doing these rescues and trying to just help out the public and make sure everyone stays safe. And I'm not trying to like belittle Phil or me, but we're not special. I mean, we're just the standard Coast Guard mission set group for a crew that going all the way from Mobile, Alabama, where we first kind of get our training, I guess Elizabeth City and Petaluma for the swimmers. I mean, it's all the behind the scenes work that truly kind of makes this operation happen. It's the crew standard. We can go anywhere and fly with a different crew, and unique to the Coast Guard, there's not going to be a hiccup. Everything is standard from East Coast to West Coast. I mean, I just did a rescue last week with a guy from Mobile, Alabama, and 10-foot shore pound rescuing an 11-year-old girl, and it didn't skip a beat with him. I only met him one time before. And I think that's something the Coast Guard we pride ourselves on, to where it's a really unique service. We're really small. We know each other. We overlap with each other constantly. We pick our stations to try to make sure we're with the same people. We're really close relationship. Anytime the swimmers are doing surf training or going surfing, 5 of us co-pilots and pilots and ACs go surfing with them. And overall, we just really, really enjoy what we get to do every day as a job, and train and make sure that we're continuing that legacy for the next set of rescue swimmers and co-pilots going forward. And honestly, just being there for the public, whether it's public relations or actually rescuing them, we just try to make sure that we're here for them and keeping them safe.
Phil? Phil?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know how to make that sound better. You know, I just joined. I joined the Coast Guard because I wanted to do search and rescue, and just having the opportunity to use my skills to go and save people is it's just an honor and a privilege. And you know, there's all ups and downs with any job, this one included. Not every day is rescuing people off a cliff, but when you do get that opportunity, it just makes you it just fills in all the gaps to like purpose and you know why you're doing what you're doing. And but so it's just incredible. And again, it really is a team effort. Like there's so many people here on base behind the scenes that, you know, that won't get the media coverage or, you know, the not quite the tip of the spear maybe, but it's like they are you know, it's a huge foundation base that allows us to do what we do. So it's just a you know, a lot of, you know, ambivalence, you know, it's just so many emotions going into it, but grateful is probably the biggest one, you know, that people can allow us to do this, you know, there's a structure for it. So
Okay. Well, thank you for all you do. And I feel totally comfortable saying that you and your colleagues are the best of the best.
all
So
right, we appreciate it.
continued success, and really appreciate you spending time with us today to share a story about what happened there, because it definitely was a harrowing rescue. I
Yeah.
just got one last question. The guy who was injured, what did he say to you after he had been rescued?
Oh, he just kept saying thank you. Yeah, I mean he's a man of few words, but I mean he just like, you know, when we got him into the cabin and I set him down in the helicopter, I mean it was just like a big sigh of relief, and he kind of just like he almost like fell asleep because I think he's just been stressed for so long. But yeah, it was just, you know, a big hug and like wow, like just in like, you know, in that situation, having that rescue crew there, the jet ski people and the swimmers on the ground, like you know, they probably eventually could have got to him, but it was probably intimidating for that guy to see all these people there already and just them not being able to get to him. So I think it was just you know, thanks for being a Coast Guard swimmer and a Coast Guard pilot. It's like that guy might have died. So he was ultra relieved and thankful.
That's a wonderful finish to our
Yeah,
interview.
yeah, yeah.
Thanks again, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Absolutely.
Of course.
So, again, if you're not a member of VAI, we encourage you to join. There's so many benefits. One of the things I like the most is our quarterly Power Up magazine, which has lots of interesting stories and helpful information that will support you in your career in vertical aviation. And 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, we have the VAI Daily e-newsletter, which keeps you up to date on things that are happening worldwide. And again, you can subscribe by going to our website. How can we help you? That's really what we're all about at Vertical Aviation International. You can send an e-message to this email address, president@verticalavi.org, what your challenges are, because more than likely we have other operators who've shared their solutions with us, and we can share that information with you. Again, we encourage you to join. You can go to our website, verticalavi.org/join. So this webinar is now over. By the way, today's webinar was presented by Vertical Aviation International. Our webinar was produced by Bailey Wood with technical assistance from PJ Barber and Jay Clark. We are grateful to people who work in our marketing and communications department, Katerina Bedoya, Chris DeJoy, Shauna Kearns, Gina Kvitkovich, and the talented writer, Jen Boyer. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, let's keep the rotors turning and let's keep powering up.